What is up, guys? LCA Recording Studios here. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to remake the Obi Wan Kenobi intro from Disney Plus using a 2D particle generator system and some 3D text. Let's go. Once you have Resolve open, we're going to start by adding a new Fusion composition. Click and drag it to bring it into your timeline. Bring the end of it out so that it's about 8 seconds in length. Should be good. Next, let's hop on into the Fusion page. First thing you're going to want to do is bring in your sand picture that you got from the internet. I have a link to one down in the description below. Mine looks like this, so that's what I'm going to be using, but you can use any one that you want. Once we have this in, shift spacebar, XF to add a transform node. I'm going to add a background, bring it over to the side, go to the inspector, bring the alpha all the way down so that it's a transparent background. Merge the transform over the top like so. Pipe this in to the media out. Next, bring in a text node, and you're actually going to use this as the mask for the merge one node. Type in Kenobi. The reason we're doing this is because if you look at the Disney Plus intro, you can see that the sand comes back to form some of the letters, and we're going to achieve this effect by going in reverse. So we're going to have it fade away from the Kenobi, and then we'll put it in reverse in our timeline. It'll come back and form the letters just like it does in the Disney Plus intro. Next, I'm going to use the font that I got for this project that looks like the Obi Wan Kenobi font. I have it linked down below. Huge shout out to the people that made this. Once you've done that, shift spacebar with the merge one selected. Type in XF to add another transform node. I'm just going to bring it over to the right like that. Then with this transform selected, shift spacebar again, type in P emitter, add that in, and at first it doesn't put it into our pipeline here, and that's because we have to change a few settings to begin with. I'm going to go to the inspector, change the region from sphere to bitmap, which will allow us to plug in this and generate the particles from this image that we've created. I'm going to go to controls, use color from region. Then I'm going to disconnect the transform from the media out one, bring it into the P emitter. And with this P emitter selected, you're going to want to hit shift spacebar, type in P turbulence, shift spacebar again to add a P directional force node. And then finally, to complete it, we'll need a P render. So this P render is very important. That's how we're actually going to be able to see all the particles. This is the most important piece. Now that we have this, we can plug it into the media out one and nothing happens. That's because this P emitter is only generating 10 particles. So what we're going to want to do is go to your P emitter node, go back to about frame 6 or so, bring the number all the way back down to 0, go forward one frame, bring it up, type in 7500 on your keyboard. I find this number works good, and we can actually see what we're doing. Then go forward a few frames, maybe to frame 11, and then click on the keyframe icon again, forward one more frame, and drag it down. So now we have this. You can see here, if we close out the inspector, that the particle emitter is generating particles from the bitmap, and the P directional force is forcing them down. But since we're going to play it in reverse, we want it to go to the left so that we can have it wipe on to the screen coming from the right. So we can go to our P directional force, click on direction. You're going to want it to be 180 degrees. We can go to P turbulence, change the X strength to something like 0.015 for the X value and 0.036 for the Y value. If you look at the real Obi Wan Kenobi intro on Disney Plus, you can see that the sand kind of comes in from the right and is faster, then it kind of slows down as it gets towards the end. So we can simulate this effect, but because we're working backwards, we need to do it in the reverse order. So I'm going to start with it pretty slow, like 0.016, something around that benchmark. go to frame 75 or so, put a keyframe on the strength, then go forward a few frames, maybe to frame 81, and decrease this to 0.0075 or something like that. And because it lasts for such a long time, we're going to have to come back to the P emitter tab, go to lifespan down here, and then just bring this all the way up past 500, just so you make sure nothing fades away when it isn't supposed to. Now, because everything is going so slow, we need to adjust this P turbulence to match it so that it's not pushing everything around the screen where we don't want it to go. I'm going to go to frame 60, put a keyframe on the X and Y strengths, go forward a couple frames later, maybe to frame 70, and then bring these down to about 0.045 and 0.062, just so that things don't get pushed around the screen too much. I'm going to take this whole node tree, move it over a little bit, click on the P render, shift spacebar, add a blur node, just so that it makes things a little less sharp on the eyes, makes it a little nicer looking, more like sand. And since we know this will have a black background at the end of the project, we can add a background in, bring it down, disconnect the blur one from the media out, pipe this into the media out one, bring it over, and then we're actually just going to merge everything on top of it. So then this will be what it looks like at the end of the project with the black background over the 3D text. After that, we can bring in a color corrector by hitting shift spacebar on our keyboard, and I'm just going to push everything a little more yellow, we'll have a few different color correctors in the end just to give things some variation in their values. Then we can do things like push up the contrast, bring down the gain so that the particles aren't so bright. And that is it for that dust cloud. Now, if you look back in the example, we had another dust cloud as well to kind of break things up a little bit, make it not so obvious that this was from the word Kenobi, because we want people to see it but not focus too much on it. So what I'm going to do, select everything, hit Command G since I'm a Mac user, and this will group everything together nicely so it's not so chaotic. You can always open it by double clicking on it. That brings it up, and then you can close it again by clicking the X. Next, I'm going to copy the group, deselect it, and paste it over to the right. Bring it in over the merge to what you're going to want to do is take the text mask off of the merge. And if we want to see things a little clearer, we can hit 1 on our keyboard with our transform 2 selected. Open up our 2 viewers, and we can size things down a little bit, make it more manageable. And what will happen now is it'll generate particles from this image and then send them along with the text to kind of break up the shape a little bit. But to make it a longer sand cloud and not just kind of one bulky one that's just caught up right here, we can go to our P emitter, go to the number, start at frame 5, go forward a few frames, and then every few frames drag it back to 0, go back up to 7500, go back down to 0, and we're going to want to keep doing this until about frame 20. As we're getting close to the end, however, we can start decreasing the values a little bit. So instead of going up to 7500, we could go up to 5000. So just kind of softening things up a little bit. If we go forward in the timeline, we can see that it kind of breaks up the shape of the Kenobi a little bit and makes it just look a little bit nicer. Like I said earlier in the video, we added these color correctors to kind of vary the color of the different things a little bit. So I'm actually going to delete the color corrector, click on the group one, shift spacebar, add in another one, and then we can push this one a little more towards the red side. Again, increase the contrast, bring down the gain so it's more manageable. Now that's looking pretty good, but if we really want to sell the effect of a big sand cloud coming in, we can add in another color corrector. Then we're going to want to take the output of the group one. You can have the same thing split into multiple outputs, so you don't have to copy and paste things over and over again, and it makes the rendering power a little less complicated. Merge the color corrector again over the composition, move everything up, select this color corrector, shift spacebar, add in a blur node. You're gonna want to take the blur size and bring it way up. You can go back to the color corrector if you want, bring down the gain so you don't notice it as much. And you can go to the merge and bring down the blend too if you want to kind of take away some of the effect. This is a little big and unwieldy and a little bigger than we want, so we can bring in a rectangle node. Again, we could take the output and put it over both of our merge nodes right here. They have the same rectangle. We can extend the width if we want, move it over, increase the soft edge amount to a nice big number, something like that. Bring it over so that we're showing part of it. But then if we go back to the beginning of our composition, we can see that it makes it fade in a little bit more. We can make the height a little bit smaller too if we want, so that it's not going over the top of this too much. Then we can bring in a different mask for the Kenobi merge, bring up the soft edge so it looks like something like that. So now we have it kind of fading in from the right, so that when we play it in reverse, it won't just get to its original spot and stop. It'll actually kind of fade out and give us a nice little feathering effect. And we can again scale up the width on this one because we wanted to originally come in from the left side, and so we want all of that to be showing. And if we want to inset it a little bit more, we can bring in this border width, and so it has a width inside of itself, which will just increase the soft edge about a little bit more. Everything's looking good here for now, but we can see if we go later in our timeline, things start to look a little bit weird. The sand is clumping up in places that it shouldn't, and this is a result of the particle turbulence node that we're using in our Sandclouds. So I can actually go back to the places that it's keyframed, bring down the intensity just a little bit so that it doesn't have such a strong effect on it later in the timeline. Or you can go to the P directional force nodes and bring up the strength in the places that it was keyframed earlier, so that it's not as slow and that the particle turbulence doesn't happen in such a long amount of time. But it really just comes down to personal preference. So if you find something that you like better, then by all means go and do that. This was just a mere suggestion for you guys to follow, but by all means go forward and come up with something better on your own. Now that we have our sand, we're going to want to go back to our background that we turned black at the beginning. Bring down the alpha value on it so it's completely transparent. Go to our render page, give it a file name, click on format, make sure it's QuickTime, GoPro Cineform for the codec, type RGB 16-bit, and then we can click on this export alpha box down here. And this will allow us to merge it over and customize it over our 3D text that we have later on. Once that is completely rendered, come back into the edit page, right click in your media pool, create a new Fusion composition, click and drag it into your timeline, drag the timing out of it a little bit so that it's 5-10 seconds long. Go into Fusion, hit Shift Spacebar, look up text 3D, bring it into your timeline, then look up merge 3D, finally a renderer 3D. Connect it to your media out one so we can see what's going on. Click on the text node, type in all caps Obi Wan Kenobi. Change the font to the one that we used earlier. Then bring up the merge 3D in your first viewer so we can see what's going on. Click on the text 3D, move it back. You can add a camera node if you want to, but I'm just going to use the renderer 3D for all the camera stuff since we're not going to be animating the camera at all. Move it back so we can see what's going on. Click and drag it down so it's about center in our screen. With the text 3D selected, I'm going to go to the inspector, scroll down to the extrusion tab, bring out the extrusion depth so that we make it a little bit fatter and actually three-dimensional as opposed to just two-dimensional text. Then go to your shading tab, scroll down to material, click on the type where it says solid, change it to image, image source, change it to clip. And then the color file, you're gonna want to hit browse. I put the link in the description for this. It is a texture pack for a corroded metal. It was the closest one that I could find to looking like the Obi Wan Kenobi one. The benefit of having a texture pack is that you can use different things like a normal map, which tells the software which parts are higher than others. And you can make some really cool brick textures and things like that where there's a lot of stuff sticking up. But for this, it didn't really matter since it was just a metal. And so I just selected this metal corroded part. If you want to learn more about using textures in Davinci Resolve, check out this video up in the top right hand corner. All right, so now that we have that set up, go to your Render 3D, click on Enable Lighting and Shadows, and that's going to turn everything black because we don't have any lights in yet, obviously. So I'm going to hit Shift Spacebar and bring up a point light, click it and drag it and put it into our merge. I'm going to select my point light, move around in my 3D scene right here until I can see it, move it back and up above the text. I'm going to move it over to the left hand corner so that we have this cool lighting in the back of our scene. And then we're going to have the lighting fade in. So I'm going to go to frame 15, add a keyframe for the intensity, and mine's already brought all the way down, but if yours is all the way up, then turn it all the way down. Go forward a few frames to about frame 20. Then I'm just going to bring the intensity back up to 1. Next, on your keyboard, hit Shift Spacebar, and then we want to bring in a directional light. Put it into our Merge 3D here. I'm going to go back to our 3D scene, move it forward, and then I want it just above the text. Then we can click on this Rotate button right here, and this will allow us to rotate the object how we want it. So we can see by these lines that it's pointing this way, so I'm going to click on this red circle right here and then rotate it down so it's pointing more at our text. And the way a point light works is it shines the light equally in the direction that it's facing, and so it doesn't matter where you have it, above or below our scene, but this just helps my brain think about it in a better way. Having it angled down kind of brings down the intensity of it a little bit. I'm going to go forward about frame 45, go to the transform panel, going to click and add a keyframe to every single one of these in the rotation section, just so if you wanted to make any changes later you could, but we're really only going to be worrying about one. We're actually going to want to take the Y rotation of this, put it at 180 so that it's pointing the exact opposite way from our composition. Then I'm going to go forward to about frame 105, and then I'm going to bring it back to 0 here so that it's pointing back at our text. And then while this is swiveling and revealing our text, I'm just going to also animate the intensity just to give it another layer of depth for things fading in. So I'm going to go to frame 75 where we're at now, set a keyframe on the intensity and bring it down to something like 0.126, and then I'm going to go forward to 105 and bring it back up to 1. So that's all that we're going to need for our actual lighting. Next, we could just do some 2D masking to give it a few more layers of revealing. So I'm going to bring in a background, pipe it into our merge so that it kind of cuts that off. Move these guys up and out of the way, merge it over our background, and this is going to allow us to mask what's going on here. So I'm just going to click on merge 1, add a rectangular mask, and you can see that only things inside of this window are being shown. So I'm going to increase this window so that it's all the way up, and then I'm going to go back to frame 1. And as you can see, things still have some glow from the various lights that we have here in the background. And so I'm just going to click on this rectangle, click on the invert box so that only things outside of this mask will be showing. Keyframe the center X, center Y, go forward to about frame 25, bring it all the way to the side. And we don't want this to be super dramatic. So what we can do is take this soft edge and crank it up to about halfway. Then what we can do, because this is still a little bit bright for this timing of the scene, we can drag in another background node, merge it on top of the last merge, click on it, add a rectangle mask, increase the soft edge to about halfway again, and then increase the width of the rectangle like we did for the last one. So I'm going to start at frame 5, keyframe the center X, center Y, go forward to about frame 90, and I'm just going to bring it all the way off the screen. Then I'm going to go to my render page, clear the settings that I had before for the export alpha, because we don't need it exported as alpha anymore. If you have both of the fusion compositions in the same timeline, click individual clips instead, and then just bring the in and out range into the area where the newest fusion composition is, where you have the 3D text, so that doesn't take forever to render. Then render it out so that we can put the sand over it in our timeline. Once you have those two things rendered out, bring them into your timeline with the 3D text on the bottom. Bring in the sand on top of it. Then once we have the sand added in here, go to your speed change, click the direction so it's facing the opposite way. And then you're just going to want to play with the timings so that the sand comes in, and when it does, starts to reveal the lettering behind it. And once you have the timings in a place where you like it, take the sand layer. You can come to this power window right here. You can change the placement of the video track that you're working on, and you're going to want to line up the text so that it would kind of come back and then form the letters as they were coming in. So click and drag it and line it up over the top of your composition. You can make it a little bit bigger if you want. Once you have everything lined up the way you want it and it's looking good, select everything, right click, new compound clip to kind of solidify everything together. Then to create the bars like we had in the example video over the top of the text, I'm going to go to my media pool, right click, new fusion composition, bring it over the top of my timeline, hop into fusion, bring in a background node, pipe it into the media out, go to the inspector, bring the alpha all the way down. Then bring in the picture of the corroded metal that we used as a material for our text. I'm just going to merge it over the top of my background one. Select media in one, bring in a polygon mask, and then I'm going to use this polygon mask to just draw a quick line that's fatter in the middle than it is on the edges, so that it kind of has that tapering off effect, like so. Go to the inspector, bring up the soft edge amount to something that looks nice, maybe something like 0.0075. Then I'm going to copy my media in one, paste it over to the side, merge it over my composition, bring this polygon, pipe it into the mask input for the media in one. I'm going to take my merge, click and drag the second one down so that it creates two lines, and then our text will be in the middle. Go back to the edit page, shrink the fusion composition to where the text starts to show up. Use the slider along the top of the fusion composition to bring in the fade so that it kind of fades in as you play the clip. One troubleshooting thing, if you notice your Obi Wan Kenobi text loses its material after a while at the end of the composition, you can just come down, hit Command B to split the clip, go forward a few frames, hit Command B again, delete the white section, come down to speed change, click on the snowflake icon, click and drag to extend the timing of your freeze frame. But that's how I made the Obi Wan Kenobi intro from the TV show on Disney Plus. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if there's anything else I can do for you guys, if there's any other videos you want made, please let me know down in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.